So welcome back to interview series. So this is the fourth video. In this video, we will be discussing interview question of the services and the routing. Right. In the previous video, we have seen basic overview question, then component, directives, and pipe. So with this video, we will be focusing on services and the routing question. So if we say services, right? So whenever in Angular or anywhere, service is a term. Service is a topic which is not only concerned with the Angular. Service is a common or generalized term which is there in .NET also, Java also, SharePoint, Python. It can be anything. So service is just a file. I'm talking about globally. Service is just a file where we can keep our reusable code. Okay, this is a global definition of a service. Service is just a class or a file where we are going to keep our reusable code, and wherever we are going to need that code, there we will be using that service and that whatever the code we need to use, right? So this is a global definition of a service. Same like that in Angular also. So if you see the definition, a service is nothing but a class which we use to provide common functionality across whole applications, right? This is very important term. Whenever you explain service, so this should come in your answer. Service is nothing but a class which we use to provide common functionality across the whole application, right? So what else we can create in service? So we can create common functions that can be used over multiple components, whether it can be API call functions or any normal functions, which is returning some value, right? So if you can see in the below example, so let's say this is an function which is returning the API call response. I have not put the API call, just a sample code is there. Instead of API URL, our API URL will be there. Let's say in your application, you are going to need API a response of particular get all users API in all the component or in some of the component. So writing this HTTP call in all the component is kind of a duplication, right? You need to import HTTP client in all the component, and this kind of HTTP dot get an URL. This code will be duplicated in all the component, right? But by using service, you are keeping that code at a single place, and wherever you need the response of users, you are going to create instance of the master service into that component, and then you can subscribe to this function. Now, first two things we have achieved here. First thing, reusability, right? You don't have to write the API call code in all the component. Second thing, consider like in all the 7 component, you have written the normal API call, right? If backend developer has changed URL endpoint, if backend developer has changed the API URL endpoint, then you have to go to all the 7 component and you need to change that. There it involved testing and everything. All the testing you have to do again and again, right? For all the 7 components. But if your code is at the one place, means in a service, so you don't have to test for all the component. You can just test any component, then you will get to know like APIs are working fine, right? So these are the advantages of keeping your reusable code in a single file, right? So this was a function for API call. Second is a normal function. Let's say this is just a normal scenario for adding 2 number, but your scenario can be anything. It can be filtering an array. It can be sorting an array, right? It can be getting particular sum or count from an array. Scenario can be anything, but you can create a generic code and keep that code in your service file. And wherever you are going to need that, pass the array, pass what you are going to need, and you will get the result returned back, right? So just for example, I have taken the function to add a 2 numbers. So here I have 2 parameters and I'm just returning the addition of 2 numbers. So wherever you need the, just an example, like wherever you need the addition of 2 number, you just have to create an object of this service and you can use it. Another example of service, let me just go back to the code. Getter setter methods are there. These I'm going to cover in the component communication, but since we have the topic, I will just explain it. Services, yes, right? So getter setter. Let's say again this subject and everything is there. Now, suppose you have some common value that you are going to need across all the components, right? or you are going to store some value, and that value is going to be needed in all the component. From one component you are going to set some value, and that value you are going to need in another component. Either you can do it in the local storage or session storage, or you can use service also. So what you can do is create an object data colon any, right? I'm just creating an object. By just to initialize, I'm adding id empty. Okay, so what I have created is I have just created an empty variable which is having data, right? Data is an object. Now let's see, practice candidate component. First I need to import that service, right? So private common, let me just add the import. Now let's say on the page load of this, or just a scenario I'm taking, I need to set some value, this dot common dot data dot, let's say name is equal to demo, right? So what I have done, common instead of common service. What I have done is in my service, I had one variable data, but data was an object. So in that I have created one property name and assigned the value. Now, let's say this value got stored in the name property. I have stored the value in the candidate component, but same value I am going to need in enrollment also. So what I can do is here constant name equal to this dot common service dot data dot what property, what was the property name property. So this I can use over here. So in candidate component, in this data variable, I have stored one value demo in the property name that I can access anywhere. So this is also way to use the service, right? So in component communication, you are going to see this when we are going to take some advanced question. There I will again repeat this same scenario. So I just wanted to explain like what are the various scenarios or things we do with the service, right? So API call, normal function, getter setter value, subject behavior we can create in common service, right? So these are the various things we can do with the service. Now, another question comes with the service. This is not related to the service, but it is a generalized question. What is dependency injection, right? So if you can see, dependency injection, again, it's not related with the Angular. It's a global term. It is there in Java. It is there in .NET, right? So dependency injection is nothing but a process of object creation into constructor of any class. This is just a, what we can say, generalized definition, because what we are doing over here, we are just creating object of this service, right? If you can see in master service, in constructor, what we are doing, this is just an object creation, right? Same like in this is master service in component. We are just creating an object. Now, so dependency injection is a framework by which we can provide dependencies what a particular class needs. Means what are the dependencies we are going to need for this app component that we can register into the constructor. Now it is not necessary that we can create an object of service like this only. Let me show you the example. So it is not necessary that we can create an object like this only. We can create simply like private common colon common service new. Okay, in this particular service needs an, what we can say, import statement in the constructor. It has the HTTP client, so that's why it is asking. But if we don't have that common HTTP client installed in that, because in the constructor of this we have one object, right? So wherever we are going to create, it will need the object also. But like this also we can create the service. Let's try HTTP clients, private new. Okay, here also it needs. Let's what it will say is declare but never use. Okay, so we don't need like this. Simply, this is also worthwhile. This is just a message like, let me rename to this. Let me remove this. And undefine. Okay. So this is also we can create an object of the service, right? But what we can say, when you destroy the component, like this is what we are doing, we are creating an object of this particular service. So it will hold some memory, right? But when you destroy the object, that memory will be like that as it is, right? Because we have explicitly created the object of that particular service. But if you do that inside the constructor, so object creation and deletion, you don't have to worry about that. So that is just a power of dependency injection it gives. So you don't have to worry about object creation and destruction, right? So that's why we have to use dependency injection. So whatever the object we create in the constructor, that is nothing but dependency injection. So again, dependency injection is not related to component. In service also we do that, right? So this is nothing but dependency injection. So wherever we have the class, and every class has a constructor, right? So everywhere we can create the dependency injection. Wherever dependency injection will be created only of the injectable, right? HTTP client is injectable, and this particular service is also injectable. Means only services objects are created in the constructor. Normal variable array we cannot create that. Okay. So this is that dependency injection. Now, one more question is there related to services, generic API functions, right? So generic is a term. Let's say why I'm saying generic. Let's go to here. Now I'm creating one function. Now this function, right? Whenever we write the API call, we specify the return type, right? Observable. Now here we say normally any, right? So any is a dynamic data type, right? So just like that, we normally create classes and interface to strongly type everything. But if you have strongly type everything, let me see if I have any class. I don't have any class created over here. So if you if you have created that class now, so you need to specify that class name over here, right? Let's say user class or something, right? So like that you create. If you know like you are going to get the particular fields of data, you create a class or interface of that, and instead of any, you put it over here. But there is a generic way to do this. If you don't need to provide the classes and interface, there is a generic way, that is T, right? So you can say get T. This is a generic function. You don't need, if you have a service which is generic, you can create generic methods like by using capital T inside the angle bracket. Okay, this is nothing but called as a generic. So this was the third question in services, because in service also we don't have that much function. Next is routing. So this is important. So first thing like routing. So we have discussed in the starting like Angular is a single page application. So it is a single page, right? So to achieve multiple page based navigation means just like I'm switching from one page to another page, then from second page to another page, and URL is also changing. So I get a feel like I'm working on a multiple page based application. So that thing we can achieve in Angular using Angular router library, right? So that is the definition. Angular is a single page application. So to achieve multiple page based navigation, we have to use routing library, right? Which is provided by Angular. Now, how do we use that routing library? First, we have to create the route. So route is an object which consists two mandatory field. Two mandatory field are path and component. There are some more fields. Let's see what are the fields we have. So this is an route object, right? If I say comma and press enter, so you can see in the route object, we get this number of things. These are the guards. Then data also in route also you can store some value using data. Door children, match, providers, redirect to, run guards, title. This is title means if you set title now, let's say demo. This demo will come over here on the tab title. Okay. So this will come over here. This is the property which we have got in Angular 15. Before that, we had the title service, but from Angular 15, we have got new property added in route object, that is title. So we can set the page title using this property, right? Coming back to here. So these are the various things we can do in the route object, right? Then second question will be router outlet, right? So just like I told you, like single page application is there, and if you have a nav bar, right? So when you click on particular application, that particular component will be loaded into the DOM. So we need to inform the Angular that where we need to load that component associated with that route. So router outlet is the thing which will be responsible to load the activated route component. So if you can see, we have a navbar over here. And let's say user clicks on the user, this particular link. So whatever the component we have in the route, that will be loaded over here. If router outlet is not there, your component won't be loaded, right? So router outlet is needed to load the activated route component. Now, another question here, someone will ask you, like how many router outlet can we have in our application? We can have n number of router outlet based on the scenario, right? So someone will try to confuse you, like obviously one navbar is there, so we can have only one router outlet, right? But no, if we have scenarios where we have multiple navbars and multiple sections where inner navbar is also there, so we there also we can have router outlet. So router outlet can be multiple, but at the time only one router outlet will be active. That is, you have to specify clearly. We can have we can have many router outlet in our application, but at a time only one router outlet will be active, right? Now we in normal HTML, if we have to navigate from one page to another page, we used to use href, right? But in Angular we have the router link, and here you need to space the whatever the path name means, router name you give, right? Here you have to specify. So that is nothing but router link. The router link is a directive which we use on the anchor tag where we provide the router value. When application compiles, it is directly converted into href only. But when we are writing, we have to write it in the Angular way by using router link, right? So with the router link, we have one more extra thing, that is active link, right? Let's say we have two navbar, right? So here you can say when you click on particular link, that link should get what we can say some activation, right? Active class, so that user know like this is the active page. Just like here you can say I have one simple dash over here, means this page is currently active out of this menu. So if this to-do list is activated in the URL, it will add this class over there. So router link active, and you have to provide a class over here. So whichever route is activated, that class will be added to that particular anchor tag, right? So this is attribute just to add a active class for the activated route, right? Then another question is, what is activated route? Now, activated route, in the name itself, it has specifies activated route. It will contain information of the activated route. Whatever the route is currently active, all the information of that route you will get in the activated route. An activated route is a service, so you need to create it like this. Then you can say you can subscribe to the params, you can get the data, right? So n number of things you can do. Like you can see like what was the previous route, right? I mean, from where it came to this particular route. So many things are there. So we use activated route when we have to read the parameter, right? How do we define the route? So there are multiple ways to define the route. This is a normal way with parameters. You can say I have a route to do with a parameter. This is a normal route, but in this route I have set some data also. You can see in data I have set the object. Then this is an empty route. If you have to set some empty route, and if we do, if in the URL it doesn't have anything, so to handle that we have to create an empty route, redirect to. If no route is there in the URL, where you have to redirect, so you need to provide the path, and path match full is the attribute you need to have. then this is a wildcard route. Let's say you tried to enter one route which is not there, right? If router didn't find any route, then it will redirect to this particular page not found component. So in many industrial application or the actual project, you will find this component. If user tried any route, right? If he type in the URL, if he goes to the URL and type something, and that route is not present, user will land to this component because this is an wildcard route, right? So these are the various types of route things you can do while declare the route. Then we have a question guards, right? So guards are nothing but since Angular is a front-end side application, so we don't have a restriction. We don't have that session and everything that we used to get with .NET and other backend application, right? So that is nothing but server-side application. So if we need to check the same thing, like user is logged in or not, if user is logged in, then only we have to allow user to visit some pages. So that thing we can do using guards, right? So guard is again a service. We have to create it using ng generate guard, and it will ask like these are the guards, which guard you need to implement, right? So can activate guard is there, can activate child, can deactivate, resolve, and can load. These are the 5 guards we have, right? So can activate is like in the name, you can just remember guard by name, can activate. When any route is going to activate, this function will execute before activating a route, means can activate. Can activate child. This will comes in the picture when we have lazy loading. Okay. Can deactivate. When user is trying to navigate from one component to another, this function will execute. Checks to see if user can exit the route, means when you are navigating from one component to another, and on that component route you have added can deactivate route, then that function will execute. Resolve is like, let's say before loading the page, you want to make an API call and you need to get that API call data before loading the component. Consider you have a scenario, or consider a scenario where labels, your page labels or data is coming from the API. So before loading your component, you need that data ready, right? Because if your data is coming from the API, what you are going to show? So you cannot make the API call in a constructor or ng on in it. You need to load the component unless you get the data, right? So resolve is a guard which you can implement to load the data in case of API call before loading the component. Okay. Then can load. Again, it's this route gets used in the lazy loaded module. So by default, when we create a can activate, so this is kind of a route we get here in can activate function. We normally read some data from the local storage or session storage. If it is there, we return to, otherwise we redirect to login, right? Next question is, how do we read query parameter from the URL, right? Suppose you have a query parameter, let's say in case of edit, right? We send the data. So suppose you have a path like this, edit, and we have a parameter student ID. So when we navigate, we have to navigate like this.router.navigate, your path name and the value. But in the but in the navigated component, means student data component, you need to read the value, right? This 1, 2, 3 will be in the URL. So you need to read that. So you can do that by using activated route service. So activated route.params.subscribe, and in params you will get the object. Here only we have student ID. So student params.student ID. Like this, you can read the query parameter. Let's say you have multiple, no? So you will get the object. So this is student ID. Like that, you can have multiple parameters also. This is also very tricky question because this is most commonly used interview scenarios. When you are working on the project also, this is going to be so much helpful. So if you have done that, you will be able to answer it. If you're not, just try to remember this code. How you can create an route with parameter, how do we navigate, and how do we read the parameter, right? So using activated route params, and you can subscribe to them. So wildcard route we have already discussed. Then one just a normal question, like what are the ways by which we can navigate from one component to another? So only 2 ways. First, from HTML by using router link, and second from .ts by using router service. So this dot router dot navigate, and you need to pass the router. So there are only two ways by which we can navigate. Okay, router event. So this is a kind of a advanced question. So since I explained like router is a library, right? Inside Angular only, but it is a separate library. So when you navigate from one component to another, there are n number of events are happening in router only. So those are the events like navigation start, route configuration load, route configuration load end, route recognize, guard check, guard child activation starts, right? Scroll, navigation error. So many events are there. But if you need a specific scenario to use this router event, right? So these are the various questions we had in routing and services. So hope you are finding this videos helpful. Only HTTP client is the topic which is remaining. After that, I will be discussing the remaining extra question, which is not related to Angular particular topic, but related to Angular, right? Some scenario based and everything, and RxJS also. So that's it with this current video.